3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, I'm Tara Thomas, the Director of School and Community Relations for Waterloo Schools. So excited to have this opportunity to share with the KVBG listeners. It's a privilege that we are able to engage in some intellectual and stimulating conversation with the educators that are helping decide the fate of your children in terms of how their learning is going to play out in our public school system. So we'd like to welcome right out of the gate here a woman who has a lot of experience in this realm. It's Dr. Rebecca Williams. She is the District Title I Coordinator, K-12 Literacy Specialist, who works out of the ESC building, that brick administration building right there on Washington and Waterloo. And Rebecca, first off, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
So this is your second year with Waterloo Schools. Prior to that, you were with AEA 267. Just give us a little bit about your background. How did you get to this point of being an educational expert, so to speak?
I spent 8 years at the AEA as a secondary literacy consultant. Prior to that, I worked at Union as a middle school language and math teacher. Prior to that, I was in Arizona for 20 years and I taught everything from second grade through 8th grade. Prior to that, my first teaching job was in Australia, so I've spent lots of time in the classroom and lots of time in college classrooms, so moving up the ranks, and I'm really, really happy to be in Waterloo.
Very interesting. So going from down under to ultimately landing up north here in Waterloo, Iowa.
Yeah.
Well, we really would like to touch on something that's it's almost a common sense approach when it comes to how children are learning today, and that is that it was brought to my attention that some KBBG listeners were interested in cursive. In 10 years, will our children be able to write their signatures as older folks do today?
You know, it's interesting that you ask that, because just last year I had to fill out a form on a computer and my signature went through the computer. You can sign your signature that way. And I thought, what a shame. What a shame that we're getting to that point. We are still teaching cursive in Waterloo. I think back to our wonderful treasures like the Declaration of Independence, and what a wonderful piece of artwork and testimony it is to the craft of cursive writing. But I have walked also into classrooms and kids can't always read cursive, and I just think it's such a shame. We are teaching it. We are not teaching it to the extent certainly that it was taught in the past, because we don't have time. We have a sense of urgency about other things. So will they still be able to do it? We surely hope so. In Waterloo, we surely hope so. I'm afraid technology is taking over much of what we're doing, but absolutely, we're still pushing ahead.
You obviously care about literacy. You want children to be able to read and connect to us how that can be tangible for families. What is it that we need to be doing outside of that school day to ensure that our child can sit down both in the classroom and in his or her future job and be a master of language and reading?
One thing I think parents should be able to do, and I would strongly, strongly encourage them to do, is go out and get a library card. Libraries are free, wonderful, wonderful resources. Excuse me.
No problem.
And they should have library cards. Kids should be able to go to the library, public library, and just, for the love of books, for the love of reading, find a comfortable chair and open a book. There's nothing better. Another thing parents can do is take time to talk to your kids about what they're reading. You and I could sit here with a book. Both of us could be reading different books, and we could both talk about the book we're reading and enjoying and loving. And what that does is build that enthusiasm. When I'm done with my book, would you like to borrow my book? So you can just simply do that with your parents and kids. Have those conversations about books. Parents could also encourage writing about what the kids are reading, because we know the power of reflection. After I've read something, often I want to write notes in the margin. In fact, this morning I was reading a book. I get up very early, and I was reading a pleasure book for myself, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so beautifully written. I have to back up and read this paragraph again, just because I love the way it was written. And when parents can talk to their kids about those sorts of things, that builds enthusiasm for reading.
What do we know about statistically speaking, the importance of reading and when? At what age is that child going to fall behind if he or she has not started to grasp the words on the page and the connections and the context?
Research, from what I'm remembering, research says that by third grade, if kids don't have it and they're falling behind, there's a very, very real possibility that they will never catch up. Excuse me. So third grade is a real pivotal year for kids. In fact, there were some research studies not too many years ago published that, and I hope I get this right, that federal prisons were calculating the number of beds they would need by the third grade reading scores.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
pretty
that
important.
crucial at that
It's
age.
very
So
critical.
if you're just joining us, by the way, this is Tara Thomas with Waterloo Schools. Dr. Rebecca Williams, who is a literacy specialist, among other things, with the district, is sharing her reflections on years in education and how reading has played a crucial role in the success of students as we're learning from the age of third grade, could be the tipping point. So when you talk about that intervention, if it doesn't happen by third grade, from third grade on, what is the district doing to keep those kids from falling through the cracks? How can we trust that when our child, if unfortunately he or she may not be up to that par or up to that level where they should be at third, what do we know from that point forward is being done to save them from essentially being a statistic?
One thing that Waterloo Schools started 2 years ago, especially at the elementary level, we're going into, we call it the PCL framework, and that stands for the Partnership in Comprehensive Literacy. It's a partnership you and I and Waterloo share. And all my literacy coaches, my 12 elementary literacy coaches are doing the training at UNI, bringing the training back to the elementary classrooms. So this current school year, 13-14, every one of our 11 elementary buildings have infused the workshop framework into the literacy classrooms, which is boosting scores. That was really clear that it's working on last year's Iowa assessments. I mean, we saw huge gains last year, and I do really attribute it to the PCL framework. Our hope is the gals this came from the University of Arkansas, down in Little Rock, and they're pushing it out towards the middle school. So there's a book being created, and it'll come out this next spring. It is our hope to take the workshop framework, which involves reading, writing, and then language arts. And language, you can infuse social studies and science. Take that and incorporate all of that in a 90-minute reading block, literacy block, and that's going to catch kids up. One of the things that we need to make sure kids are doing is reading voraciously. And if they're not on grade level, allow them to read at their independent level, but the more they read, the better readers they become. So that's one tiny part of the workshop framework that we are very passionate about.
And you touched on the Iowa assessment scores. Obviously this week, especially in the news, the buzz of No Child Left Behind and how is Iowa falling behind in that so many of our schools are not meeting what some would say is unattainable criteria. But specifically looking at reading, how are we doing? What can we be proud of in terms of our scores?
You know, when we got these scores this year, we were thrilled. We were really thrilled. We were so excited. I wish I could remember when it came out in the Courier, but the scores were phenomenal. Of the 18 buildings, without counting, well over 3/4 of them saw significant gains in reading from the previous year. Yet, the large districts across the state did not see anything of significance. For example, one of our buildings saw gains of 12.7%.
Tell us which school that is.
I'm so excited, it's Cunningham.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right down the street.
I was going to say, I knew it was Cunningham. I hope that
Yes.
she mentions it. So,
Yes.
and why is that? Why such a huge gain? What's working?
I think it's the workshop framework, and it's having the right kids in the building, it's having the right teachers in the classrooms. It's having teachers that have coaches that are passionate about helping kids, passionate about helping teachers. 12.7% is an amazing, it's a staggering game. And I do really attribute it to that workshop framework. I really do. And passionate teachers. I have had the pleasure of sitting in classrooms, in second grade classrooms, and just overwhelmed with the quality of education that's happening in our district. I am so thrilled to be here and witness to the phenomenon that it is. I really am.
If you're just joining us, you're hearing the voice of Dr. Rebecca Williams. She is a K-12 literacy specialist and district Title I coordinator for the Waterloo Schools. This is Tara Thomas with Waterloo Schools Communication Office, and we are going to have a guest coming up that I want to preview is Jim Day. We're going to talk all things anti-bullying as well as Jim's extensive history with NAACP and just his work in Eastern Iowa in this community. So stick around for that, but a couple more minutes here with Rebecca. I want to ask you, when you talk about the positives, the great stories we have to share, we also know that the overarching headline and the perception statewide and beyond is that no school perhaps is going to meet this No Child Left Behind standard, or in that regard, for all the gains, maybe we still have a long way to go. So how do you tackle that, A, and then B, stay motivated, stay positive when you have a lot of teachers who might feel that some of these goals are insurmountable in terms of some of the achievement levels that are set out, and then the numbers that play out where like 2 out of 3 schools aren't meeting the demand?
You know, that is the 50-cent question of the day. How do you maintain that enthusiasm? I think, personally, I think you just tackle it one day at a time. What we need to do is take our best game into that classroom every day. That's what has to happen. And I have to believe and hope that someday the law is changed, because it is an impossibility. That is just my hope. That someday they say, you know what were we thinking? What were we thinking? This is an impossibility. And to hold that over the heads of our people, it isn't fair. So the important message is take the best game to the classroom every day, do the best thing you can for your kids every day, and they'll all benefit from that.
And lastly, what do you say to the parents and grandparents listening who would say, you know what, despite all the great things, the still concern is that we may not be meeting some of these achievement goals? How can you reassure those folks that we are on the right track and there are things coming down the pipe that you mentioned, such as some of the work that you're doing with UNI, that are really going to help continue to grow that achievement, specifically in your area of reading?
I would just tell the folks that are listening that Waterloo is the right place to be. It is. We are bringing the right things to our kids. And when I just came from a building. When I see the wonderful work happening through writing, through reading, we're on the right track here in Waterloo. And just stick with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your thoughts, your insight. We appreciate your time. Dr. Rebecca Williams, K-12 Literacy Specialist and District Title I Coordinator for Waterloo Schools. We'll be right back with Jim Day. Thanks for staying with KBBG. This is Tara Thomas.
Prince Caspian Schools.
It's hard to sit on my
She's
tongue in the middle of that.
The stories Caspian had with Trinity.
Thank you so much. I appreciate working with you here. This was so fun. I really love this opportunity, and it was great to have you give me the fill in the blanks here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so have a great day.
Well, you know.